Good afternoon and welcome to the 2022 Census of Agriculture Results Briefing. My name is Lance Hoding and I serve as acting chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board here at NASS. The census data release marks the culmination of a monumental effort that required considerable commitment from every single NASS employee, support from our partners across USDA and various industry groups, and of course, the cooperation of our nation's farmers and ranchers. I'd like to extend my personal gratitude to every producer who took time out of their busy schedule to complete their census form and therefore make their voice heard. We're excited to share some of the highlights with you today. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to our presenter, Brian Combs, Chief of the NASS Environmental, Economics, and Demographics Branch. Brian.
Well, good afternoon. I'm happy to have this opportunity to highlight some of the high-level results from the 2022 Census of Agriculture. The data was released to the public at noon on February the 13th. At that time, NASS published over 6 million distinct data points. Several million more data points will be released as we continue to release additional products over the next few months. Given the magnitude of data, we'll only be able to touch on a few very high-level items at this briefing, but we are excited to work with all of our data users to further explore this valuable public resource. The briefing will offer a few remarks on the census data collection efforts. Then we'll dive into the data, looking at the count and distribution of farms and ranches, a look at economics, and some of the insights and the demographics of those involved in the farm decision-making. We will conclude with a quick summary of a few of the additional products that will be made available later this year. Conducted once every 5 years, the census covers virtually every aspect of U.S. agriculture. It is a complete count of the nation's farms and ranches and those who operate them. It looks at the land use, production practices, expenditures, and other factors that affect the way farmers and ranchers do business in the 21st century. The first Census of Agriculture occurred in 1840. The 2022 Census of Agriculture is the 30th in the series and the 6th conducted by NASS. The power of the census is its ability to visualize and understand important changes in agriculture at the U.S., state, and county levels. The 2022 Census of Agriculture had a response rate of 61%. This is down 10.8 percentage points from 2017. Response rates are the highest in the Midwestern states and lowest in the Southeast and a few of the western half of the country. Looking at the bar chart on the right, I would note that in 2022, NASS made a concerted effort to encourage responding via the web. While mail response is still the most common, web response was up 17 percentage points from 2017. While response rates are down, NASS still received over 1 million responses to the Census of Agriculture. NASS continues to apply rigorous, accepted statistical practices and standards to the Census of Agriculture to account for all U.S. farms and the people who operate them. The Census of Agriculture methodology can be found within Appendix A. As we walk through this presentation, it's important to keep in mind the definition of a farm. A farm is defined as any place from which $1,000 or more of agricultural products were produced and sold or would have been sold during a census year. The current farm definition was established in 1974. Now let's look at the number of farms and land in farms. The number of farms at 1.9 million decreased 6.9% from 2017, or about 142,000 farms. This is a larger percent decrease than we had seen in the past 20 years. Land in farms was also down 2.2%, or 20.1 million acres. This places the average farm size at 463 acres, which is a 5% increase from the previous census. In this map, we can see how those 1.9 million farms are distributed across the U.S. by county. For example, you can see the high concentrations of farms in eastern Texas, north through the central U.S., and on the Pacific coast. Texas has more than twice as many farms as any other state. but it is also down from 2017 by approximately 18,000 farms. All states in the top 10 experienced declines in farm counts from 2017, except Iowa, which increased slightly. The census allows us to view patterns of land use across the nation, both in terms of how much land is used for agriculture and how that land is used within agriculture. 39% of the nation's total land area is devoted to agriculture. That percentage varies greatly by the state and county. Land use for agriculture is highest in the mid part of the U.S., with a swath of land from North Dakota stretching down into Texas. Many of those counties, more than 70% of the land is used for agriculture. In terms of agricultural land use, permanent pasture and cropland were the two major uses, with just under 400 million acres each. There were 301 million acres of harvested cropland in 2022. Woodland and other uses added just over 100 million acres to round out the total. Before moving into the details of this slide, I would like to note that not all large farms in terms of acreage translate into large farms in terms of value of sales. For example, greenhouses, nurseries, or livestock operations may have a small number of acres, but a high value of production. The 2022 Census of Agriculture shows declines in the number of farms in all land size classes except the 5,000 or more. Farms with less than 50 acres decreased 6%, or about 55,000 farms, while farms with 50 to 500 acres decreased 7%, or approximately 61,000 farms from 2017. On the left side, we show the same farm numbers by size farm from the previous slide. On the right, those same classes are tied to the land in farms. You'll notice that the 5,000 plus acre class controls approximately 42% of the land in farms in 2022. This group's influence has seen a continuous increase over the past 20 years, increasing 7 percentage points over that period. Now we'll turn our attention to farm economics and focus on the economic measures from the census, looking at total value of production, crop and livestock sales, and farm income. As we all know, weather conditions and economic factors can affect farming operations, the volume of commodities available for sale, and the prices received for those commodities. These factors can affect the sales class which a farm falls into for a particular census year. I'll also note that dollars in the census are nominal or not adjusted for inflation. In 2022, the western half of the country suffered from long-term drought, while extreme weather events impacted the Midwest and Southeast. Prices for major field crops and livestock were up substantially between 2017 and 2022. Corn, soybeans, wheat, broilers, and milk all had near record high monthly prices during 2022, while avian influenza impacted the poultry sector, driving up eggs, especially for table eggs. The number of farms with over $1 million in sales has been steadily increasing, while the other classes have held steady or declined. 6% of the farms in 2022 were in the 1 million plus category, compared to 4% in 2017. Like the slide we saw a few minutes ago, this slide displays the farm count by value of sales. The right side shows the magnitude of the contribution from those farms with $1 million or more in sales were to the total value of production. In fact, more than 75% of the $543 billion in total value comes from the farms with greater than $1 million in sales. Those 105,000 farms represent less than 6% of the U.S. total. The share of sales coming from farms with a value of production greater than $1 million increased from 69% in 2017 to 78% in 2022. In terms of value of production, California remains the top agricultural state with 11% of the value. The top 10 states contributed to 55% of the total value of production in 2022. Most states saw value of production up over 30% from 2017. And half of the states had increases of more than $2 billion. Looking at the total value of production at the county level, we see that it's certainly not spread equally across the country. For instance, you can easily see the impact of cattle feeding in the high plains of Texas, or the cluster of poultry production in Southwest Missouri and Northwest Arkansas. The table on the right identifies the top 10 counties in terms of value of production. The first 9 of these counties are in California. In fact, Fresno County has a higher value of agricultural products sold than 23 individual states. Fruit, tree nuts, and berries were the primary commodity contributing to these increases, with the exception of Monterey and Imperial counties, whose largest value came from vegetables, and milk led the way in Merced County. In the stacked bar graph, we can see that total value of production increased substantially from 2017 to 2022, up almost 40%. This was largely driven by near record high prices for many crop and livestock items during 2022. Taking a deeper look at the value of crop production by category, you see that grains and oilseeds led at just under $169 billion. Total crop sales in 2022 were $281 billion, up 45% from 2017. Most of this increase was due to large increases in prices of grains and oilseeds, which were up 58%. All other categories showed increases. The table on the right indicates the leading states and its contribution to the total value of production for that category. For example, Iowa contributed 14% of the grains and oilseeds. There were no changes to the top states for each category from 2017. Looking at the same slide for livestock, we see that total livestock sales were up 35% at $263 billion in 2022. All livestock categories showed increases in value. The largest increase was for poultry and eggs, up 56%. Texas, North Carolina, California, and Iowa each led the way in livestock categories of cattle, poultry, milk, and hogs and pigs. There were a few changes to the top states for livestock. North Carolina replaced Georgia for poultry and eggs. Washington replaced Mississippi for aquaculture. And Texas replaced Colorado for sheep and goats. Looking at how we got from 2017 to 2022 in terms of value of production and which commodities contributed to the increase, we broke apart the grains and oilseeds category to show the top 10 commodities with the largest impact. If you take a look at cattle, for example, it was $89.4 billion in 2022, which was up $12.2 billion from 2017. The largest increase was for corn at $37.3 billion. Moving across, you can see that there were only increases, no decreases in the top 10 commodities. This is unusual. Typically, there are some increases and some decreases. The table on the right shows the actual total value of production for each of the top 10 items. We can now turn our attention to the other side of the ledger and look at farm production expenditures. Expenditures also increased from 2017, up $98 billion. The largest two expenses for farms are feed and livestock purchase. The livestock purchase includes both breeding and non-breeding animals. The largest change in expenses from 2017 include an increase of $25.7 billion for feed and $12.6 billion increase for fertilizer. Again, we only see increases in expense categories, no decreases. The past few slides, we've discussed the total value of agricultural products sold and farm production expenditures. The census also collects data on receipts from government payments and farm-related income. These data allow for the calculation of net income at multiple levels of aggregation, including state, county, and congressional districts. At the U.S. level, all income categories showed large, uncharacteristic changes between census years. Between 2017 and 2022, net farm income increased by $36.7 billion. The average net farm income of $79,790 was up 85% from the previous census. This wraps up much of the information regarding economics, and we'll now move into internet access. USDA is investing heavily in broadband and high-speed internet access. The census captures internet access on farm by type of access. Overall, internet access has increased from 75% to 79%. Generally, internet access rates were higher in the western and northern states. The chart on the right details the percent of farms with access by the type of connection. Farms may have multiple types of internet connection. Respondents were asked to report all that applied. There was a large increase in mobile access, moving from 39% in 2017 to 62% in 2022. Now we'll move into the demographics of the farm producers. This is one of the unique items of the Census of Agriculture, as it gives us a snapshot of those involved in the farm decision-making. The graphical data highlighted is for a farm producer. A producer is someone involved in the decision-making of the farming operation. For most data items, information is collected for up to 4 producers. The number of producers at 3.37 million decreased 0.8% from 2017, a much smaller change compared to the decrease in farms at 6.9%. This is due to a large share of farms reporting multiple producers. The number of farms with only 1 or 2 producers declined, while the number of farms with 3 or more producers increased. 60% of all farms reported more than 1 person involved in the farm decision-making. Female producers account for 36% of all producers. 58% of farms have at least 1 female producer. On average, farms with female producers are smaller in acreage and in sales. The map shows distinct regional differences in the tendencies for farms to have a female producer. Farms in the western part of the country are more likely to have a female producer. Before we go into the details of this slide, I would like to note that the marketing category is new for the 2022 Census of Agriculture. This chart shows the involvement of men and women in the decision-making on the farm. Female producers' highest participation in decision-making occurs in the categories of day-to-day decisions, record-keeping, and financial management aspects of the farm. The average age of producers is a long-running data item in the Census of Agriculture. It receives a lot of attention each census cycle. From the map, we can see that the average age of all producers at the county level. Average age varies across the country. Producers in the Southeast and Southwest tend to be older than the overall average. The table on the right highlights the average age over the last 20 years. You will notice that the average age increased by about 1 year per census cycle. The average age of producers increased from 57.5 in 2017 to 58.1 in 2022. This continued the trend, but smaller than in previous census cycles. The next slide features young producers. A young producer is anyone under the age of 35 as of December the 31st, 2022. The map of young producers looks somewhat like the inverse of the map of average age. The concentration of young producers is higher in the northern U.S. Overall, 8.8% of producers are considered as young. Young producers may be running their own farm, or they may be operating with other producers. This map shows the change in young producers at the state level from 2017. Young producers increased 3.9% from the previous census cycle, with the largest increases in the Midwest and Great Lakes regions. This chart is in the same format as the producer decision-making by sex chart, but details decision-making by age category. Young producers are more likely than other age groups to make decisions regarding livestock. On average, young producers participated in fewer decisions than older producers. Using the same layout, we will now look at new and beginning producers. A new and beginning producer is anyone who operated any farm for 10 years or less, including the census year. Overall, 30% of all producers are new and beginning. 33% of all farms have a new or beginning producer. You can see from the numbers that not all new and beginning producers are young. In fact, the average age of new and beginning producers is 47.1, which is lower than the overall average. New and beginning producers increased 11.4% compared to the previous census. Farms with new and beginning producers are smaller than average in sales and acres operated. Overall, 9.1% of producers have military service. 15% of all farms have a producer who has served in the armed forces. The average age of producers with military service is 68 years old. The average is much higher than the average of all producers. The number of producers with military service decreased 18% from the previous census. The share of farms with producers who served in the military is highest in the Southeast. Farms with a producer with military service are smaller than average in terms of acreage and in sales. To recap the major themes presented today, farm numbers and land and farms have both declined. There continues to be more of the largest farms. Fewer farms account for most agricultural products sold. The average age of farmers and ranchers continues to rise. There's an increase in both young and new and beginning producers. There's an increase in internet access, especially via mobile. NASS will be releasing many additional products from the 2022 Census of Agriculture. In late March, state and county profiles will be released. Congressional district profiles will be released in May. Race, ethnicity, and gender profiles in June. The Puerto Rico Census of Agriculture in July. In late 2024, the first Census of Agriculture follow-on studies will be released. These provide a deeper dive into the topics of irrigation and water management and aquaculture. Thank you for your time today. Now open it up for any questions.